Hi everybody, Steven here. So you've got a vSAN cluster set up, perhaps a 2-node cluster, and you've heard of this thing called nested fault domains, and you're not sure what it is. Stick around, that's what we're going to talk about. See you in a bit. Thanks for sticking around, everyone. So what we're going to do is talk about nested fault domains. I've got a video on fault domains right here, so you need to watch that in order to understand what a fault domain is, right? So this is going to be specific to 2-node clusters and stretch clusters, okay? So we're going to take a look at that. I got a bit of a lecture and I got some demos I want to show you. Pretty typical. And I always like to throw this out at this point. I want to say, hey, if this is stuff that you kind of like, please support the channel by subscribing to it. It's really easy. Just, it's free. Click on the subscribe button. Another way to also support the channel is to like the videos. That's also really good. And share the videos. That's really good as well. And another ways, if you want to, is super thanks. Totally up to you, but I appreciate it. And for those of you that have given super thanks and subscribed, 2 thumbs up to you. Thanks very much. All right, so why don't we jump right into it? Let me get my iPad going here. All right, so let's talk about nested fault domains. All right, so the first slide here is just I'm talking about the original storage architecture first. We'll talk about express storage architecture afterwards. So let's learn how to walk before we run. What I'm showing you here is failure to tolerate equals 1, mirroring. And this is just a quick review, right? So I got a VM over here. I got a vSAN cluster set up, and this VM I've decided to say I want to protect it using failure to tolerate equals 1. So you'll see what we'll do is we'll break this down to a component here and a component here, and we basically mirror these components. That's a RAID 1, and then there's a witness component, and the idea is if this component dies, well, we still have 3 components or objects left over, so we have high availability. Really basic stuff. Again, you can watch my vSAN 101 if you want to, okay? Now when we talk about a 2-node cluster, and I just did a video on that, when you look at a 2-node cluster, it's basically the same thing. You've got, again, this is generally in the same location. You could actually look at this as a stretch cluster with only 2 nodes across 2 different locations, to be honest with you. I'll do a video on stretch clusters. But anyways, so here we do the exact same thing. We have our VM, and it's broken, then failure to tolerate equals 1, and we break it down into these 3 components, 2 components that we're mirroring, and a witness. Same thing here. We got our component, and then we got our witness. So if this VM had a 100 gig disk, this component would be 100 gig, this component would be 100 gig, this component's going to be really small. It's just a witness component. So that's on our stretch, our 2-node cluster, or technically this could be a stretch cluster across 2 sites with a witness location as well, okay? And again, the idea is if this goes down, we're still okay. We need 2 out of 3 in order to survive, okay? Now, the question comes in here, can I do RAID 5 across this? Now, RAID 5 with the original storage architecture, RAID 5 needs, it does a 3+1, so it needs 4 hosts. With express storage architecture, it does a 2+1. That's express storage architecture. It means it needs 3 hosts. Okay, we'll talk about express later. So let's take a look at fault domains. So in this example, let's say this is my 2-node cluster. I can't do RAID 5. I don't have enough hosts here. Okay, so I can't do RAID 5, so it won't let me do it. Now notice this example. I've got a disk group, okay? I got a bunch of disks in here, capacity disk, and there's a cache disk, okay? That's original storage architecture. Here's another disk group on this server, okay? A bunch of capacity disks and a cache disk. Makes sense, all right? So I can't do RAID 5 here. However, with nested fault domains, what you're doing, let's go over to here. Here's my same pictures before. What I'm going to do now is I want to have my VM, and let's say I'm doing failure to tolerate equals 1, RAID 1. I'm going to put the component, and witness on. In this example, this is just 1 server, so this is a 2-node cluster, right? So now I've got my VM the whole VM on this one node. But notice I got 3 disk groups here, 1, 2, and 3, because I'm going to put these components on 3 different disk groups. There's the fault domain, right? Each disk group's a fault domain. Then we're going to mirror across these servers. So we repeat this, we take this, and we kind of duplicate it over here. So that VMs, component, and witness is on the 3 different disk groups, okay? So those the disk groups are basically our fault domain. So what we're doing here, you could almost look at this as a RAID 11. I don't like saying that, but anyways, you're mirroring across these 2 hosts, okay? And you're doing failure to tolerate within the host. Now, this could be a stretch cluster as well, okay? I could have 3 hosts on the left side here at one site, 3 hosts on the right side, or 2 hosts or whatever, and I could be doing that, protecting the VM with failure to tolerate at the one site, and then I'm going to mirror the site. So really this nested fault tolerance or fault domains is you're mirroring your sites. So the first level of RAID is RAID 1, and that's at your sites, or in this example, since this is a 2-node cluster, is across the 2 nodes. So technically, let's put everything back, I could lose this disk group and I'm okay. Everything is working good. And technically, I could kill this whole server and still be good because I've got a witness and I've got my site over here, or this second node here. So you've got 2 levels of protection. So this really gives you higher level of redundancy. Now, in this example, there's a cost here. Let's say this VM is 100 gigs in size. Well, you're mirroring here, right? There's 100 gig there, 100 gig there. Now you're going to mirror all that over here, 100 gig, 100 gig. So a 100 gig VM is costing you 400 gigs of storage. Pretty expensive, right, folks? So, and how do we do this, by the way? When you create in your storage policies, let me go into here, zoom in here. You actually see under my create storage policies, and I'll show you this, you actually see there's site disaster tolerance. Notice I pick here host mirroring 2-node. There's also stretch cluster I could pick here as well, to be honest with you, site protection. And then I pick my second layer. I'm doing failure to tolerate equals 1. So it's this, technically it's this extra setting right here that's allowing you to do it across a 2-node or across a site if you're doing stretch cluster, okay? So let's go into here. Now, how about RAID 5? So in this example, I'm showing still a 2-node cluster, but I'm able to do RAID 5 here. So maybe this is a branch office. I can't afford to, you know, I want to save space, right? And I also want maximum redundancy as well, in case an actual host fails. So here we're doing host mirroring, okay? So over here, this, come on, host mirroring, okay? So we're doing RAID 1 across the host, and then we're doing RAID 5. RAID 5 is 3 plus 1. So you'll notice here, in order for me to do RAID 5, I need 1, 2, 3, 4 disk groups per server. In this case, this is a 2-node cluster. Again, if this was a stretch cluster across sites, watch my stretch cluster video, I could have multiple servers at one site, multiple servers at another, and that's okay. I could do it with less disk groups per server. So for example, if I had 4 servers at site 1 and 4 servers at site 2, I could have 1 disk group inside each server and be able to do RAID 5 across and RAID 1 across the sites. But let's say this is just a 2-node, then you need at least 4 disk groups, okay? This can get pretty expensive as well because guess what? Each disk group needs a cache device, okay? So that gets a little costly there, but it's a lot cheaper than doing the RAID 1, okay? I don't need 400 gigs of storage type of thing, okay? Now, the question is, can I do RAID 6? Now, this is the original storage architecture I've been talking about. Can I do RAID 6? And remember, RAID 6, we need 6 hosts. Basically, it's a 4 plus 2. We have 4 data bits and 2 parity. Okay? So that means we need 4 hosts, or 4 individual fault domains, right? Sorry, 4 plus 2, we need 6 fault domains or 6 hosts. So does that mean I could just add in 2 more disk groups per server, so 6 disk groups per server, and do this? technically that would make sense. Unfortunately, in the original storage architecture, there's a limit of 5 disk groups per server. So in a 2-node cluster, you will not be able to do RAID 6 with this nested fault domain. So this really gives you another level of protection. So why don't we jump into that right now? Let's take a look at it from the lab perspective. So be right back. Okay, we're back. You'll notice I got 2 clusters set up. This is pretty much my typical vSAN clusters, nothing too crazy. Now notice this cluster here, I only got 2 hosts. I'm doing a 2-node cluster here. My witness is over here. Again, watch my 2-node video on that if you want to see that. I've got my witness right here, okay? So let's go in and create a storage policy, right? Let's just go in and we'll go into policies and profiles. I'm going to say VM storage policy. I'll say create, and I'll call this, I don't know, site mirror failure to tolerate equals 1. Okay, so this is a 2-node I'm showing you. Technically, they could be a stretch cluster across sites as well. If I go next, and I go enable rules for vSAN storage, I go next. Here it is, site disaster tolerance, none, which is like you just got a straight cluster. You're not doing any 2-node. Here's my 2-node, or here's my stretch. Again, they basically the same. You could also do none keep data on preferred, or none keep data on secondary, right? Or none non-stretch cluster, right? I'm going to say 2-node. That's what I got. And here's my failure to tolerate equals 1. I'm going to click next, and it's going to show me the data stores that are compatible with this, and it's showing me none. Actually, let me cancel this. Let me show you my 2 data stores. I got 2 vSAN clusters. I got cluster 1, which is original storage architecture, and the second cluster, which is express storage architecture. If I look at my data stores, I labeled them as such. This data store is from the express storage architecture cluster. This one's from the original. So we notice both of them were not compatible. So, and let's look at my, let's go back to my cluster now. Sorry. So it's not letting me do that, right, across sites. Okay, and the reason for that is, if I go back to my presentation, the reason, if I go back to here, if I do a nested, I need 3 disk groups at least to do a failure to tolerate 1. I have to be able to house that whole VM inside one host. In my example here with the 2-node, right? I only got 1 disk group. Let's go back. If I go back to my cluster here, oops, let's minimize this stuff here. If I go back to my cluster, if I go into configure, and if I go disk management, and if I say view disks, right now I'm looking at the disk on host 1. Okay, and I only got 1 disk group. That's it. This disk group has a 50 gig cache disk, and it's got 2 100 gig capacity drives, right? So I'm going to go in and add more groups here. Now, I'll do this offline because I've already shown this. You can watch my video on that. So let me come right back, okay, after I add some disks, okay? Okay, I've added some disks. Let's look at my cluster now. If I go view disks, you'll actually see I've got 3 disk groups on host 1, and then I'll have 3 disk groups on host 2. So I put in 3 now. So let's go back in here. Let's policies and profiles. Let's create that policy now. Again, I'm going to call it site mirror failure to tolerate equals 1. I'll go next. I'll pick the vSAN storage again. I'm going to say, again, host mirroring, 2-node, or stretch. Again, this would be valid for a stretch as well. So I'll say 2-node here, RAID 1, and I'm going to click next. And it comes up and it shows me my original storage architecture data store is compatible with that. So let's go next. Finished. I'm done. Let's go back into inventory. I'm going to click on host 1. That's going to create a new VM. New VM. Okay, whatever. Oh, I'll call it VM1, just for argument's sake. It's VM1. and host 1, it's on, and then I'm going to pick the vSAN data store. I'm going to pick the site mirror fairly tolerate equals 1. I'll go next, whatever, Windows. I'm going to make it a small disk, and I'll say next, finish. Give it a few seconds, and we see VM1 comes up. Now let's look at the disk placement here. So I select the VM, I go to monitor, disk placement, and what do we see here? Okay, we see I actually have, let's just, again, you see the hard drive over here, and you actually see, in this example, there's 3 witnesses, which is kind of really bizarre and weird. But anyways, that's not bizarre and weird, because I got a witness at, let's go back to my iPad and webcam. When you look here, this is basically what I just done. I got a witness at on one host, another witness on another host. Again, these hosts could be at different sites, and then there's a witness on the witness appliance. So let's go back to the screenshot, and what do we see here? If I go back up to my hard disk 1, I got RAID 1, so I got my 2 components on host 2. I'm mirroring those. I got RAID 1, I got 2 components on host 1. Again, these hosts could be at different sites. Then I have a witness component on my witness machine that's at that other site, and then I've got my witness on each server as well. And there's the home directory, or the home of the machine. I don't have any things set up for, you'll notice here I don't have the VM kernel swap. So again, and you see over here, again, this is the home of the VM, and you see the similar setup. So essentially, we've got the complete VM, a component, and a witness on each disk group on one server. We got again a complete copy of that on host 2, one component on disk group 1, one component on disk group 2, and another witness component on disk group 3. So we're able to do that. Now let's go into, let's just delete this, because let's delete from disk. Yep. Let's go in and change policies. Let's create another one. Site mirror RAID 5. Okay. I'll click next. Oh shoot, I already did one. Let's call it RAID 5 again. Sorry about that. I must have had one set up before. So I'll go next, and then over here I'm going to pick again my 2 node or stretch. Again, if these are 2 nodes across 2 different locations, so I'm going to pick 2 node. I'm going to pick RAID 5. It's going to come up with an error here. That's okay. It has to be all flash. You see, it all goes away. I'm going to click next now, and then you see there's nothing compatible. Why? Remember to do RAID 5 with the original storage architecture. It's 4 plus 1, right? Sorry, it's 3 plus 1. So you need 4 fault domains. So since I want to do this across sites, I need 4 fault domains, 4 disk groups on each of my server, since I only got a 2-node cluster. Okay, so I'm going to cancel this. Actually, yeah, I'm going to cancel it, and then let's go in and add another disk group to that. So let's go back to here, and I'll probably okay, we're back. Let's look at the cluster here. Oops. So if I go into my view disks, I've got 4 disk groups per server now. So let's create another VM. Actually no, forget that. Let's go into the policy, right? So let's go into policies and profiles, create, and again I'll call this mirror RAID 5. Just, you know, whatever. So mirror RAID 5. We'll go next. I'll pick storage, and then I'm going to pick 2-node RAID 5. Again, I got to make sure it's all flash or RAID 5, and then I'm going to click next. And you now see the original storage architecture data store is compatible because I got 4 disk groups, right? So now if I go back into my inventory, if I right click on this, a new VM, and again I don't care about that, I'll call it VM1. We'll go next. Pick that. I'm going to pick the vSAN data store. I'm going to pick my site mirror RAID 5, or mirror RAID 5 is what I created before. I'm going to go next. Okay, whatever, and I'll make it a small disk. And go next and finish. And then we just give it a few seconds to come up. Again, monitor physical displacement. Notice I'm doing RAID 5. So you'll notice here again, components. There's 4 of them on host 2. They're RAID 5 in it. Then there's 4 of them on host 1. We're RAID 5 in it. Then the witness component is on that witness host at a different site or whatever. And again, we're RAID 1ing across those RAID 5s. That's a fault domain with original storage architecture. I can't do RAID 6 because we do a 4 plus 2, right? So 4 data, 2 parity. You need 6 in total. I would need 6 disk groups in my 2-node cluster. If I had multiple servers, if I had 6 servers on one site and 6 on another, I could do it, right? Anyways, that's it for original storage architecture. Okay, what about the express storage architecture? Let's go back to the iPad. So with express storage architecture, same kind of thing if you're doing a 2-node or a stretch cluster. Now, the downside about this, as I showed you with the number of disk groups we actually have to have in the original storage architecture, you got a lot of cache devices there. So technically you're kind of wasting money on cache devices. Remember, with express storage architecture, there is no cache device. So your fault domain is not a disk group, okay? Because remember, we have basically a storage pool on the server, just a bunch of hard drives. So it would be the individual drive. So here's an example of failure to tolerate equals 1. This is just regular express storage architecture. You need 3 servers. And again, remember how things are a little bit different there. We have our 3 components, okay? And then you got a performance leg, which is kind of like almost a witness, okay? Sometimes you may see it witness, sometimes you may not. Then we stripe those components. Same thing with the performance leg over here. So this is like doing a RAID 1 here, okay? So when we look at this, again, in this example, this is a regular express storage architecture. In a 2-node, depending on the number of disks, we got to put all these things on individual disks, which we'll kind of see. Here's a RAID 5, okay? So RAID 5, we do a 2 plus 1, so we need a minimum of 3 hosts, right? And you see we do our component. So this would be my data, and let's say this is my parity bit, right? Then we take that and we stripe it. And I talked about that in my striping video as well. And then we have the performance leg. This is RAID 5 across these 3. So components 1, 2, and 3. We're doing RAID 5 there. We're doing RAID 0 here. And then this performance leg, we got RAID 1 going on over here. Okay? And I talk about that, the express storage architecture. So if we're going to do a stretch cluster across sites, I'm going to take all this, put it on hosts at one site. So maybe I got 3 hosts at one site. Great. All that goes on the 3 hosts, just like in this picture. Then I would duplicate this at the next site. Great. And then I would do a mirror across those. So technically, this gets really weird. This would be a RAID 150, right? Anyways, so it can get really complicated here, right? So let me do a demo on that, okay? So let's get back to my left screen here. All right, so let's close. Let me delete this guy. Delete from disk. Yep. Okay, so there's my express storage architecture. If I can view disks, I really only got 1 disk per server, which is really silly. Okay, so in order for me, let's back this slide up here. In order for me to do failure to tolerate equals 1 and mirror across servers in a 2-node, let me go back to my iPad, right? This would be, let's say, my witness, right? I'd have to take all this and put it across 1 server. So that means I would need 3 different fault domains on the individual server. So I would need 3 disks. Let me show you. I only got 1 disk. Let me go back to my thing here. I only got 1 disk per server, and that's it. So that's kind of silly. So if I go in here into my policies, and we already seen this, policies, I will create. If I go, I'm just going to leave this at whatever. I'll pick here. I want to say I want to do a 2-node or, stretch cluster. It's fine. I'm going to say I want to do RAID 1. Great. Notice my express storage architecture data store is not valid. Let's go incompatible. You see the Express Storage Architecture data store listed here as incompatible. So I need to add more disks per server. So let me cancel this. Now I'll tell you right now, if I add a second disk, that's 2 per server. It won't work. And again, that's kind of a silly configuration I have. You wouldn't do that in the real world. So I'm going to put a total of 3 disks per servers. Okay. So let me do that right now, and I'll probably speed this up. Okay, so it's done. If I go back to my view disks, you'll see there's 3 disks on host 4. If I show you host 5, there's 3 disks on that. Okay, again, this is just a 2-node cluster I got set up. So let's go into here now. Let's go back into policies and profiles. Let's create it. I don't care what the name is. Actually, I will. I'll call it. Actually, I could have just used my other one. I'll call it site mirror FTT equals 1 ESA. Just so that we see that's a new one I'm creating. There's that other one there. I could have used that. So I'll say 2-node site mirror. Let's go next. We see both data stores are compatible here. Okay, remember I got that original storage architecture one. So great, it's compatible. I'll go next, next. So now let's go in to my inventory. I could have used that other one I created before, but I just wanted to demo that to you. All right, so let's create a VM here. I'm gonna right click, new virtual machine. Again, I don't care the name of the VM. Host 5, I'll pick my data store. I'm going to pick that, I think it's site mirror RAID 1 that we picked. I can't remember. I'll click next, I'll click next, next, and then I'm just going to make this whatever, maybe 10 gig in size. They'll say OK, we're next, and then hit finish. And then let's just get this up. Yep, OK, it's done. So click on the new VM, and let's look at monitor physical displacement. So you see again over here, I got my RAID 1. This is on host 5. I got my RAID 0 components, 3 of them. Remember, we got that one component that we're striping, okay? So this is where it gets a little bit complicated sometimes. And again, both of those are on RAID 5. So I got a disk object here that I'm striping to 3. I have another disk object. Sorry, got a disk object I'm striping to 3. That's RAID 0. Disk object I'm striping to 3. That's RAID 0. And I'm mirroring those 2, okay? And then I have my performance legs, which are acting as witnesses, okay? Then I'm going to repeat the same thing on host 4, and you'll see down here. Now, it's actually a little bug here because it's not showing me squat, right? But if I actually go here, components by host placement, if I look at, this is host 5, if I look at its first disk, let's forget about the home, okay? Just let's look at the hard drive. There's 3 components there, okay? One of them could be that performance leg, and the 3, and then the 3 RAID 0 components. Another disk, same kind of thing, and this one here probably just have 1 component, a witness. If I look at host 4, same kind of thing. There's 1 component, which is probably just a witness. I got my performance leg, and then the 3 RAID 0s, and then a performance leg, and my 3 RAID 0s as well. So this can get really complicated real fast. Now, again, it won't let me do a RAID 5. Let me show you this. Let's go back into policies and profiles, create. I'll just carry on with that. Let's go to here, and let's pick, again, 2-node. Let's pick RAID 5. I got to make sure it's all flash. And if I click next, it's going to show me, oh, sorry, yeah, it will let me do a RAID 5 because I got 3 disks per server, and with Express Storage Architecture, I do a 2 + 1, so I only need 3 disks per server in my 2-node cluster. So, okay, great, let's go back and rename this thing something that makes sense. I'll call it mirror, let's call it site mirror RAID 5 ESA. Okay, next, next. Availability to node, again, it could be a site RAID 5. Okay, great. And then we'll go next, and we see both of them are compatible. Go finish. Let's go back into inventory, and let's create on, let me delete this guy first. Right click, delete disk, and let's go and create a new VM. Again, I don't care the name. We'll go next, and then we'll pick this, We'll pick my site mirror RAID 5 ESA Express Storage Architecture. Go next, next, and again I'll make my disk maybe 10 gig in size. Oops, 10 gig. Next, finished, and we'll give it a few seconds. And like I said, I'm not going to power it on because then at that point it needs to create the virtual machine swap. I'll click on the VM here. We look at placement again with the we got our performance legs. When you look at here, you see the performance legs. Then you've got your RAID 5, 2 components, 2 components, and 2 components. So we got, remember RAID 5, we got one component, another component, and another. We're doing RAID 5 across it, but now we're striping. So we got this component has 2, this component has 2, this component has 2, and then we RAID 5 across it. And then we do the same kind of thing on the other host as well. And again, the interface is messing up. It's probably because I'm in the non-supported environment, but generally that's what it is. Let's look at group it by host placement. If I look at the first disk, I got 3, 3, and then 2. I'll probably have something very similar on the other host. Okay, so so that's basically nested fault domains. With the Express storage architecture, it can get really fun. Anyways, folks, I hope you enjoyed this. If you found it entertaining, give it a thumbs up if you don't mind. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, hey, now's a good time to do it. Please support the channel by subscribing. Leave comments and questions down below. I try to get back to them as quickly as I can. And see you in the next one. Bye now.